Hey, True Crime Besties, welcome to our brand new series, Beyond the Crime Scene, where we dissect the minds behind the crimes. I'm Jen.
And I'm Sam.
And today we unravel the dark and twisted tale of John Wayne Gacy, the infamous killer clown. John Wayne Gacy's troubled journey began on March 17, 1942, in Chicago. Raised in a tumultuous environment, Gacy faced abuse and alienation from an early age. His psychosexual history, shaped by disturbing incidents, laid the foundation for the darkness that would later unfold. Gacy's struggle with his sexuality, coupled with a troubled childhood, set the stage for his unsettling future. We explore the psychological complexities that haunted Gacy, leading to his internal turmoil and the realization of his attraction to men. Despite a tumultuous past, Gacy found a semblance of success. From a self-made building contractor to a Democratic precinct captain, he carved a public image that concealed his sinister desires. We unravel the layers of Gacy's public and private life during this seemingly content period.
Gacy's double life takes a horrifying turn as he embraces his alter egos as Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown. We delve into his performances at children's parties and events and the disturbing statement he once made, "Clowns can get away with murder." That is so terrifying.
Ew.
And people wonder why I don't like clowns.
Yeah, me either. We're both terrified of clowns. Side note,
Yes.
Sam and I are terrified of clowns since we were little.
And he just makes it even worse into my adulthood, in your adulthood.
Yeah.
In 1968, allegations of sexual assault marked the beginning of Gacy's criminal activities. We explore the legal repercussions, failed attempts to silence the victims, and his eventual conviction leading to a divorce and loss of custody of his children. Gacy's release on parole marked the beginning of his deadliest years. We uncover the chilling details of his murders, the use of handcuffs as a method, and the unsuspecting victims who fell prey to his sadistic desires. Before we dive into more about John Wayne Gacy's last words, his victims, where this psycho serial killer came from, while I was doing some more research, I actually found out a lot more about his childhood and how troubled he was. His dad would literally beat him and his sister with numerous objects, which is terrifying to think about in the least. Gacy suffered a lot with his image. He couldn't play in sports because he had asthma. He also had a lot of syncope where he would faint and pass out for no reason, and his dad would say that he was just doing it for attention. I'm not saying like that gives anybody, oh, here's a flag, let's, go murder a bunch of people. But that's kind of, I think, where his mind started forming and the whole aspect of becoming a serial killer. As he got older, he wanted to agitate his dad and get his dad's approval. And the reason why he decided to fall more into the political realm is just to make his dad mad.
See, if we kind of reverse back and talk a little bit about like the psychological aspects of serial killers, this is something that I touched on in the first episode with Ted Bundy. Obviously, it's not an excuse for their behavior. I mean, like you said, again, just because you had a rough upbringing doesn't mean you should become a serial killer. But if we're looking at more of the psychological effects on any type of abuse that a child experiences, it's unfortunate because some children do grow up and become killers or, something within that realm because they don't know how to love. A lot of them become narcissistic or have narcissistic personalities. So I think that's interesting. And then trying to get his dad's approval, I'm sure, as he was a young child. And then as he became, a teenager and then an adult, agitating him, getting on his nerves, doing things out of spite. So you see kind of a pattern of his behavior. Mm-hmm. And so that's just interesting.
The whole thing is, it's very interesting and trigger warning. He did go through sexual assault as well. And he knew that he was gay and he was afraid to come out as being gay because obviously back then it was a totally different world than it is now. And I know he got married, they had 2 kids, and he did end up losing custody of his 2 kids. The other really interesting thing is serial killers' minds have always made me think, like, why they do the things they do and why they are the way that they are. And I remember reading something about, like, how their, like, gray and white brain matter is different as well, and how things are linked differently. And of course, like, the upbringing's gonna be something along those lines. And, you know, I think for him, he wanted to finally be somebody that his dad would accept. And I think that he was able to kind of find his way through his alter ego through becoming a clown. Now, a really interesting thing about that, Jen knows the story as well, but I would like to tell all of you, is so Gacy was actually a contracted clown through Bressler's 33 Flavors in Chicago. My uncle, his ex-wife, so they were young, they were teenagers. She actually worked at Bressler's when Gacy was a clown there.
Wow. Yeah.
I could not even imagine having to do that. That's not even the creepiest part. Is my family lived in Chicago at the time, and Gacy would hand out flyers to try and lure the boys. And my mom almost gave a flyer to my uncle.
What made her not give it to him? Do you know? Did she just have a bad feeling?
Yeah, she said it was, you know, she's like, oh, he needs work and, like, I should give it to him. And then she's like, my mom was very intuitive with things.
Yeah.
So I think she just decided to toss it in the garbage. I mean,
I'm so glad she did.
Thank God. It's terrifying. And, you know, to all of the victims, like, my heart still goes out to all of their families and everything. I can't even imagine. It's weird to, like, have that kind of a tie-in with
a serial killer.
Yeah, like, oh, I can't even think about it. Like, imagine, like, being at work and, you know, you just think somebody's dressed up as a nice clown and he's actually a serial killer.
Did you ever find out or chat with your mom or your uncle, like, after the fact? Like, did you guys ever talk about it? Like, what they felt? Like, oh my gosh, like, what could have happened?
My mom was really creeped out by the entire thing, just like I'm sure everybody else in Chicago. I mean, my dad was living in Chicago at that time. I think that's around the time that my mom and dad actually had met too. You know, it's weird because hearing about John Wayne Gacy as I got older and, like, you know, the stories and, like, even hearing that story, and then, you know, Bozo the Clown was around, and I was still afraid of clowns. And I remember my mom told me that Bozo lived by us, and I was so freaked out. And then that's kind of how the conversation came up about Gacy. And I mean, it's creepy. Like, it hits so close to home. Like, when you think about, like, the most notorious serial killers, I mean, Gacy's at the top. You covered Ted Bundy. I mean, we still have so many more that we're going to cover. And I mean, even just thinking about, like, how somebody just puts on a mask and that's it.
It's terrifying. Even nowadays, because it's different. It's just such a different world.
And the media wasn't such a huge impact on our lives as it is now. Look at all the speculation circulating, the serial killer that's in Chicago right now, which we will talk about at a further time. The men in their 20s, you know, ending up in the river and stuff.
Many men.
There's so many sick psychopaths out there that follow in the serial killer realm, and we don't know about it. Just think about not knowing John Wayne Gacy is your neighbor. It just goes.
Or you're working with him at an ice cream shop.
And he seems like a nice clown, which I don't think any clowns are nice. Sorry to Ronald McDonald.
No, we're not fans of clowns.
No.
Never. So we're going to pause here because there's so much to dive into with Gacy and the rest of his back history. We're going to dive also into his killing spree. We're going to discuss some of the victims and give them voices because They deserve that. So we're going to chat a little bit about that. So make sure you join us in the next episode. We're going to do a part 2 as we dive further into the investigation, Gacy's arrest, as well, and the ultimate reckoning for the man who wore the killer clown mask. So make sure you stay tuned for part 2 of Beyond the Crime Scene, the monster behind the killer clown mask.